and welcome to episode 31 of the Clacks Women for Indie podcast. And it's a beautiful sunny day here in Clackmannanshire. Still in lockdown, so not many people about, which is such a shame because the cherries are out. Still, it's all for a good cause, and as our First Minister explained to us, that more of the pain now means it's over more quickly. First thing we're going to cover is a bit of an update on Brexit. Do you remember that crisis we were talking about before the current crisis? It hasn't actually gone away. And also I'm going to bring you a little bit of news of a new show that Indie Live Radio is putting together. We've also got Finn's Lockdown Diaries, and we drop in on the Clacks WFI virtual coffee shop. And then for those of us looking for things to do in lockdown, we've got some tips from Lindsay about drying herbs. So there you go, bit of everything. Politics to gardening by way of chat. And music this week again comes from Ross Bugden, and I think this is my favourite of all the ones I've listened to of his so far, and it's called Olympus. Now, probably the longest running show on Indie Live Radio is the daytime show, and it goes out on Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 11:30. It's hosted by Val and Marlene and is usually a mixture of chat, guests, songs, all on a political indie theme. Last week the guest was Philippa Whitford, who is always a wonderful guest. And there's a chat room which you can get into from the Indie Live Radio website. And there was quite a lively discussion going on in the chat room. And just out of the blue, Val invited those of us in the chat room if we wanted to Skype in and be part of the show. So we managed to get a couple of us on there via Skype. And it worked quite well, having the discussion of the reactions to the interview. So following that, what Val and Marlene decided to do was to try the Friday show as a slightly different format and have it a kind of news review where we've got more of us on there discussing, and perhaps a rotating number of guests that come on and discuss things that are on the news. So for the first show, it was myself and Ray, who does the Indie Pram podcast. We volunteered to be the guinea pigs. And we all were asked to bring along a topic to start a conversation on. My topic was on Brexit, and the reason I chose that was partly because it seems to have disappeared from the news agenda altogether, but also because I'd just come across a document issued by the EU, which was about the Northern Ireland Protocol and what the UK government needs to do to get ready to do the things they've already committed to doing by the time the transition period ends at the end of December. So here's a little bit of the discussion we had on the show, but then I'm going to follow it up with something interesting that I picked up from Scottish Parliament on the same topic.
Something that I just came across by accident on Twitter last night, and the European Union have published some protocols. There's a note of desperation coming through in them, because one thing that's disappeared from the news entirely recently is Brexit. And other than Ian Blackford raising it at PMQs this week and not getting much of an answer, it's gone very quiet. But we're still in the position that they're refusing to extend the implementation period. So it ends on the 31st of December. Now, what the EU has just issued is 7 pages saying, please tell us where you've got to the UK government. And this is just about the Northern Ireland Protocol. So we remember that the deal that Johnson struck was to make the border essentially down the Irish Sea. And that's got all manner of complications which need to be sorted. So just looking at the actions that are required by the government, and I don't see how they could possibly get this done by the end of the year. So I'll just read through some of the highlights of what needs to be done and see if you think it sounds like it's doable. So this is the EU's technical note on the implementation of the protocol on the Northern Ireland issue. So first of all, they're saying practical implementation measures must start immediately, so the protocol will be operational by the 1st of January. So the first thing is rights of individuals, which they've signed up to protecting the rights of individuals in Johnson's deal. So the EU is now saying the United Kingdom has committed to implement its commitments by means of dedicated mechanisms. The United Kingdom should therefore provide details on the dedicated mechanisms it intends to create and a detailed timeline showing how those mechanisms will be fully operational by the end of the transition period. So that sounds like a huge amount of work just for that bit. But then it gets worse. If you go on to the movement of goods, again, by the end of the transition period, the United Kingdom has committed to apply the relevant Union Customs Code formalities in respect of all goods leaving Northern Ireland to either a third country or Great Britain. So you'll recall that Gove kept saying that it'll be almost frictionless and there might be a little bit of paperwork, but actually this whole customs system has to be put in place. And it gets worse, that sanitary and phytosanitary requirements, the EU saying, in order to prepare in particular for the application of controls on animals, plants and their products entering Northern Ireland from Great Britain, the UK needs to clarify whether it intends to designate additional posts for the performance of official controls in Northern Ireland, e.g. Larne Port, given that importation of goods subject to official controls is only possible through these kind of posts. And if only the current existing posts are maintained, as of the end of the transition period, there will be no entry point in Northern Ireland for live animals and for products of animal origin if they're unpacked or if they're preserved at ambient or chilled temperature, implying a significant risk of disruption of the trade flows entering Northern Ireland. So that in itself, unless they put special ports with arrangements in place for these things to be checked, food stops moving between Northern Ireland and the UK. They've also got something under fisheries where it says, under the protocol, Union customs legislation does not apply territorial water of the UK, which is fine. They've been saying that, which means that any UK fishing vessels, for the purpose of the protocol, are considered third country fishing vessels in Northern Ireland. So if they try and land fish into Northern Ireland, then all landings of fish by a UK vessel must be subject to EU customs rules, including EU tariffs and all the sort of paperwork that's required there. They've also got different requirements for VAT, for the electricity market, for state aid. But the bit that I think summed it up for me was the EU talking about businesses will need time to prepare for the change to the customs regulatory and VAT regimes so that they're working by the 1st of January. And for businesses in Northern Ireland, this will include the introduction of customs procedures and formalities for goods entering Northern Ireland from Great Britain and for goods leaving Northern Ireland for Great Britain, the introduction of regulatory checks and controls, including these phytosanitary controls for goods entering or leaving, the introduction of prohibitions and restrictions in respect of goods entering and leaving, so they meet the requirements of the EU, new regulatory requirements for fishing vessels, the application of VAT, the implementation of a dual VAT regime in Northern Ireland with one set of rules applicable to a supply of goods and a different set of rules applicable to a supply of services. And it says, to avoid disruptions of business activity, the United Kingdom should urgently engage with the business community in Northern Ireland, as businesses must be able to prepare for the new requirements well in advance, and the Commission is here to help with any assistance that could be required. So I'll not read any more of the detail there. Does that sound like a frictionless, oven-ready solution? And that's just Ireland.
That was the phrase, wasn't it? An oven-ready deal, really. I mean, I don't know, Fiona, I'm not surprised that's not in the news, really. It's, it's so stark, isn't it, about we're in no position to do anything about meeting those requirements.
But it just makes you wonder, though, that If the reason we're not hearing anything about it is because actually the UK government's just got so much on its plate just now, it can't even think about it. But if you follow that through, if they haven't put any of these things in place, the only way that they can get out of that mess is to go for the extension. And they're refusing to go for the extension. So does that mean that they've just given up the ghost and they're going to go for a no deal regardless?
The logic of it, isn't it? And I mean, I see Crosssticks has just put a comment on the chat box, pretty well just saying that, just said the only way Brexit can be done is to crash out on World Trade Organization rules. That has always been the Tory plan. I must say, I think these days I tend to agree with that it has always been the Tory plan. I mean, I didn't think that about a couple of years back, but I think all the evidence now is doing it. Especially, as you say, if they rule out an extension, then, you know, crash out is what's going to happen. Caustic carries on. That's Tory government need to get rid of the human rights laws so that they can keep the gig economy going, get rid of the European Court of Justice, so that means it makes it a bit easier to impose what Crosssticks refers to, their very English Brexit, which is a good phrase, I think, very English Brexit on Scotland.
The thing, though, that then you've got to think about is where does that leave Northern Ireland and the peace process? Because that's all predicated on that deal that he's signed. You know, Johnson has signed up to these things, part of the Get Brexit Done. So if they then renege on what they've signed up to, does that then mean everything else that they signed up to falls away as well?
I think it would really open the door to an Irish unitary referendum if that happens.
Yes. Definitely. And where does that then leave us with an independence movement? I mean, that could be the boulder that starts rolling that gets the whole thing going, because, you know, even people who voted for a Brexit, how many of them voted for a crash out, everything grinds to a halt Brexit?
Stuart McMillan to be followed by Colin Smith. Stuart McMillan.
Thank you for signing off. So that's a question for Cabinet Secretary Michael Russell as to whether he's received any indication from the UK government as to whether they intend to seek an extension to transition, and also what damage might be caused to Scotland both socially and economically if transition was not extended given the current COVID-19 crisis.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Russell.
I think it's very clear to the vast majority of businesses, whether or not they supported or did not support Brexit, that the idea of coming to a conclusion of negotiation by the end of December is increasingly bizarre. A whole range of meetings have had to be cancelled. Even the United States has withdrawn at the present moment from negotiating a new trade arrangement because there simply isn't the bandwidth in any government to deal with this. There is a way through this, which is for the UK government to seek an extension up to 2 years. The withdrawal agreement allows them to do so. And I think almost everybody believed that would happen. It looks as if the UK government has said that will be very bad news for business, but it will also be very bad news in terms of the economy more generally, because the projections from economists that the COVID crisis will hit the economy by 30 to 35% in terms of decline in GDP, and increasing skepticism that there will be a rapid bounce back is very bad news indeed. If you were to add to that the effect of Brexit, then that news would be disastrous. Now, that is not just my view. It is not just a view of a number of businesses. A range of organisations have said so, up to and including the International Monetary Fund. And I really do think that the UK government has to now step back, to realise that this is not a thing, and to recognise that seeking that pause, that period of time for reflection, is what the circumstances demand. And to go into an ideological obsession that insists upon this matter going forward will be enormous, add damage to enormous damage, and affect us all very badly indeed.
Right, to take our minds off the prospect of no-deal Brexit, let's go and drop in on Finn and family in Tillicoultry and see how she's feeling about the world at the moment.
Hello, it's Finn here, and I thought I'd give a few peaks and troughs over the last couple of weeks of lockdown, and we might be interrupted occasionally by an overexcited wood pigeon in the background. Peaks so far, I would say, are the discovery of Anna Massey, on the Black Isle correspondent, and her videos, which have been very uplifting, at the same time as down to earth, and are wrapped around supporting folk getting through lockdown psychologically, I think. Anna's a member of Blazing Fiddles, so I hadn't realised I'd actually seen her in concert. It was one of the things we did when we first came back up here, was we found out that Blazing Fiddles were playing, so a friend of mine in Glasgow got us tickets, and it was a great night. It was because it was a night of reunion and a night of seeing them, so that was a nice connection. Anna's videos I can definitely recommend, because they're just a laugh at the ordinary, and I appreciate that. Another big peak has been a pal of mine who's struggling generally. She'd shared a video that is about a pal of hers coming out of ICU, and I think that just brings it closer. It's that 7 steps to Kevin Bacon kind of thing. It makes it very, very much more real about the impact this is having on folk. So to see somebody coming through and being clapped as they're coming out of the ICU by everybody wearing their PPE, just really uplifting. That's what it's all about, really. The personal peaks have been that I've got a thing about trying to try and send wee thanks or messages of thanks to folk when I can. So I've sent illustrations to Janie Godley and Dr. Philippa Whitford, and they've been very gratefully received. In fact, they've shared them on social media, which is very good of them. But the responses they gave personally were really touching as well. So I just think it's important to make those kind of connections and just try and thank folk, because these are two folk that are trying to keep everybody going as well. Dr. Whitford had done a sponsored cycle dressed as an Easter bunny for Ayrshire Hospice. The link to donate is via her website as well, but I think it's important to kind of say thank you to folk for what they're doing. I don't know if you've noticed, but We Scribbles and others are doing portraits for heroes. So they're doing individual portraits of, I think it's mostly NHS folk, but I think a lot of them doing key workers. I've done a few myself, but that's just individually for ex-colleagues in health and social care, just as a wee thank you personally to my friend. But We Scribbles and others are doing their portraits for heroes, which are really, again, uplifting, but a great thing to do. And it does show that things like illustration, poetry, all the things that normally get cadged under the arts and entertainment have their own place in everything that we're going through. Drawing cartoons generally just helps me get through anyway. It's just juggling that with the kids, which has been another peak. I mean, for example, my son was making a parachute for Jack of Jack and the Beanstalk fame yesterday. It was a wee project, what if Jack got to the edge of whatever world the giant was in, and suddenly somebody's gone and chopped his beanstalk down. What you going to do? Well, Jack's going to have to be resourceful or get mushed. Both me and my husband now have shaved heads. The clippers have been out. The kids have been active with them. The other flip side to that is less shampoo, more hats. Troughs have been the usual, just looking at mass stupidity. A friend of mine has gone peak Karen from Facebook and decided that lockdown should end because she saw 14 lorries on the M8 yesterday, but last week only 7. Struggling with those kind of things, in contrast to the rest of the world looking in at the UK in utter despair and upset and anger. Other troughs would include the usual pressure on self to do more than perhaps is wise at the moment, and just accepting what is enough. I've seen a lot of posts flying out about this, but it's fairly standard in normal time, isn't it? Apart from lockdown, it's this ever need to be productive, beginning to question why, and spending valuable time with folk doing nothing is actually a really important part of being alive. Other troughs have included, as my husband is now without work and is volunteering, but it's seeing the impact on him. He doesn't like not having work for multiple reasons, all the usual reasons, but also he just likes to be useful. So, but he had an interview earlier this week, so hopefully that will come to something. It sounds very positive, but it's a similar situation to a lot of folk at the moment, that uncertainty and furloughing. So today's helping each other get through is going to involve finding out what cake my daughter wants to bake today, and probably a cycle ride. And then a wee bit later on, there's going to be coffee and Zoom with the wifey ladies, which I have to say I do look forward to every week because they are very grounding. They get fairly wound up about stuff that is understandably wind-upable, particularly in current context. But they're a group of very proactive and very measured women who I admire a lot, so it's always great to Zoom with them. But that's it from me just now.
Thanks for that, Finn. And what a brilliant segue into our next section, which comes from that virtual coffee meetup that we had, and some very high dudgeon on display today.
I'm doing okay, yeah. Not been anywhere, not done anything. I think all creativity. I don't have the motivation. And I thought I would have more motivation being inside all the time, but I have less.
I found that I started with a flurry of DIY things that I've been meaning to get round to for years, and I did the first 2 on the list, and then I just kind of ran out of steam because that sense of urgency wasn't there. And I was thinking, I can do it loads of time, I can do it anytime.
Yeah, Tracy, I understand what you mean about creativity as well. I'm finding it, I mean, I've always found it a wee bit difficult when the kids are in to work. And actually that's more of a guilt factor than an actual doing it factor, because I'm thinking, oh, hang on, they're here, precious moment. And when actually they want me to leave them alone half the time anyway. So there's that balance. But also, I don't know about you, but you kind of have things that you think, oh, I could start that, and then you hope the motivation will then kick in, and then it doesn't. You just flatline. You just think, right, I want a cake now. So
yeah. Then NBC Janie Godley, she's talking about some of the trolling and the feedback that she's getting from some parts of the populace, and she's saying sort of folk have got too much energy, and she says the guys generally, they need to get out to the park to kick about or something like that. They've got too much to say for themselves. They really need to run off some steam.
That was even before lockdown for her.
Oh yeah, I know, but it's come to a kind of a peak. And yet she's got such a presence and a profile, and love what she does, so she's got to keep going in a way, but she does it with such a light touch. She makes light of everything, and she's just like, these guys who've got too much energy, get out to the park if you can, go for a walk rather than come and bother me. I'm just trying to get people through this. So
what happens, isn't it, that generally you notice, like the national comments and just about everywhere, well, the women's voices just shut up, don't they? You go, oh, I'm not getting involved, but I'd really like to try and positively go and back them up. Like Jamie, try and make a point of following her and saying that's brilliant. And okay, she might have a career on stage, but no one's immune from that.
No.
She's quite open about her feelings.
There was a good little snippet that I saw on YouTube. It was the First Minister talking about Janie Godley. Said she's actually really cleverly making the point, because if you listen to her, she's reinforcing the point that the government's trying to make, about the face masks or whatever, but doing it in a funny way, so it's more accessible.
Because she's done the child-friendly ones without all the effing and blind. Looking forward to the next one. So, there's that dimension to it. So she's not forgetting about how the kids are coping through this either. On the subject of women, there's that book that's just come out as well. I don't know if you've seen it advertised, but it's Why Women Are Blamed for Everything. But she says it's selling really, really fast. It's just looking at sort of the history of debate and women's role in anything, really, and how that's being played out. But I think one of her last posts last night was, I'm really actually quite fed up with the dick pics now. I've seen quite a few, so I don't need to see any more. So it seems to be a theme, I suppose, is just if you don't have anything good to say, wang it out.
It's kind of a domination thing as well, isn't it? I think it's quite an aggressive.
Yeah, alpha male.
Yeah, here's my weapon.
It's just a set old gold, isn't it? It's the patriarchy. It's always been, but that's the whole point of it underlying it, isn't it? Keep us in our place.
Yeah, I've been seeing the hashtag something to do with blaming women. I'm just wondering if that's linked with that.
I think it's that one.
There was some really horrifying tweets that people were sharing about times they'd been blamed, and there was one where it was a woman this 25-year-old bloke attempted suicide, I think it was, and the newspaper reported it as bloke attempts suicide when his 14-year-old girlfriend rejected him, and she's going, 14-year-old girlfriend, she was being abused by him. You know, and that's how it's reported, because she's to blame for being
statutory raping a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
Exactly, and
It's like open season on wanging it out. How is everybody coping with the pressure cooker sort of syndrome, would you say? For you, Tracy, how's it been, because you're shielding it? I don't think I've spoken to anybody yet who's been shielding. So what's your experience of that?
It's frustrating. It's just frustrating that I can't go out and get my own prescriptions. I hate to wait 2 weeks to get a food order. So it's frustrating. But I'm actually really pleased that I'm on my own.
Really?
Because I'm digging a hole. I loved him to bits, but I dug a hole for him.
A lovely one to do.
The honesty is a breath of fresh air, Tracy, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I taken a very keen interest in gardening.
You've been in face coverings, haven't you, Lynn?
Yeah, I've made a few, but I'm so slow at doing it because I've only had the sewing machine for a fortnight, and I have to say it was never my forte before. I think the last time I used the sewing machine was when I was at high school, and in fact the tartan material I'm using now to make the face mask, I made a pencil skirt with when I was about 16.
I've just been out to the shops in Stirling, and those wearing masks come far too close to you. So there's a bit of me that gets quite cross-about it, because they're feeling like they're so safe that they can just wander around, and you're like, ugh!
Yeah, no, that was always the danger, wasn't it? Which is why they said they weren't recommending it. But it's not been... It's called universal masking, and if everyone wears a mask, then it affords a protection. It's about us spreading on people. But as you say, Joy, people are then feeling a bit kind of bulletproof, aren't they? And getting too close. But better that they've got a mask on and getting too close than not got a mask on and getting too close. Because some people are still doing that as well.
Can I bring up something that I discovered this week, which I find very interesting, and it might be relevant for us all writing to our councils about? 38% increase in people using bike.
The
Scottish Government given money to the councils to help improve cycle networks, but councillors and the council staff are not taking that on board. Bit of an interesting one. They're just ignoring the fact that this cash is around in order to improve, because anybody who cycles, the cycle tracks, if you've got a cycle track, great, but most of the time they do not exist.
The Scottish Government are giving a significant sum of money. All you've got to do is ask for it, and it's 100%. So there's no excuse not to take up that as a challenge to go and get that money spent. There's no catch to it. Because if you're trying to keep social distancing, the schools are all going in at the same time. That's a massive issue in terms of everyone milling about at the same time. So they might have to sequence, like, when school, talking about like actually closing roads off as well, you know, make them completely pedestrianised around town centre, which makes perfect sense. There's always been a great deal of reluctance to do that from shop owners, because they feel just cut down the traffic, no one's going to go to the shops. Although all the evidence points the contrary up. There's tons of evidence to suggest if you actually block traffic off, your footfall goes up, your numbers actually goes up. So there's no doubt about it. In terms of commercial interests, it's in everyone's interest to actually get rid of the traffic in the town centres. And you've got a good reason now to do that, because if you're trying to maintain these 2 metre rules and trying to encourage people to go back to shops, then you don't want it to feel busy in terms of bustling shoulder to shoulder, because that's not going to be accepted. Then what you have to do is take space away from the roads. So,
although the one point I would make to any cyclist is to get off the pavement. Be honest.
Here's the thing. I appreciate that as well, because what we can do now, because road traffic's decreased, You just basically put the bollards on the road and you create a designated cycle path on the road. There's more than just a painted line, because you're correct. If people are cycling and they don't feel safe on the roads, then they're just going to jump and use the pavements.
So there we go, another wide-ranging discussion from the Clacks WFI coffee meetup on Zoom, including guest appearance by one of the wifey's husbands there, with a little bit of information for us on changes that could be made to our environment to encourage social distancing in the future. And to finish off on a nice soothing note, here is another short episode from Clacks WFI Lynn's, who has a YouTube channel called My Little Bit of Peace. And here is a lovely little episode that I really enjoyed about herbs.
When you go in the supermarkets, you see the packets of fresh herbs. Now, sometimes you can pick these up really cheap, but you're thinking, what can I do with it, unless you're going to use it straight away. The things that you can do with them is you can chop them up and put them into ice cube trays with a little bit of water. But what I do with them mainly is I make my own dried herbs. Here we have tarragon, so I've just put them on a cooking tray, try to spread them out as much as possible. This is a packet of roasting herbs. So we've got rosemary, sage and thyme here. But what I also like to do with the sage and the rosemary, depending on the season, is you get your little sage sprig and your rosemary sprig, and you get a jar of water, and you slowly peel off the outer leaves. And what I like to do is get a glass or jam jar of water, ideally the little, either the mustard ones or the salsa jars. All I do is I just strip off these little layers, and they actually smell gorgeous because I love sage. And you just chop half of the leaf off like this, pop it in there. What I normally do is I get a bit of cling film and put that over the top. So you just put that over the top, put a little bit of holes in there, and then just wait for them to grow. And by magic, here's the one I prepared earlier. There's a shoot coming on the sage, and it's actually grown another set of leaves while it's been in there. So I will put that one, I'll put that back in the jar, and all these little bits that you've pulled off, I will put them over on the tray, and I will show you how to dry herbs in a little bit. You can also do it with rosemary, just the softer stem bits. This bit is a little bit woody, but as you go up a bit, you get these bits here. This is what you can do with this time of year. All I'm going to do is put the bits that come off onto the tray, sniff off some of the things, just encourage them to grow, and then try not to place all of it in water. You can do the same thing with this, but it takes a little bit longer for the woody stems to do it. And I will go on and I will show you how to dry the herbs. What I have done already is I have put the oven on, and it's on 50 degrees Celsius. Now, this is a fan assisted oven, but if yours isn't, I recommend about 70 degrees C. So it's really, really low. Right, that's them in the oven, and I just leave them and I come back to them. You can set a timer for about an hour and then see how it goes. We're about 40 minutes later, and this is the tarragon stems that were on them, and all I've been doing is just running them wrong way round, run my finger down the wrong way. It's coming off nice cleanly. Pile of tarragon leaves here that's really quite dry. Here we have the rosemary. Again, pull the leaves away. The kitchen is absolutely gorgeous at the moment with the tarragon, rosemary, sage, thyme, and then you can always use these little stems, or you can put them straight back into your compost bin. Nothing is wasted. And you can store them in a paper bag. I wouldn't necessarily store them in a plastic bag, but what you can do is you can buy these online. They are little cotton tea bags. You can open your little packets, and there's your little sage to go in your cooking, or you can use that as your storage use.
There, I've come over all good life now. I think I'm going to head back out into my own garden and enjoy the rest of the sunshine this afternoon. That's it from us for this week, and we'll catch you all later. Remember, 10 o'clock on a Tuesday and 6 o'clock on a Thursday on Indie Live Radio. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye now. Thank you.